Paul, I thought this week what might be really interesting for us to do is to basically discuss after 7 weeks of this season, entering week 8, to basically discuss what has really stunned us over the last month and a half as we've gotten into this season. This idea came to me on Sunday night after the results of Sunday in week 7. The one thing I kept thinking, man, the Chiefs are such a shock. I did not see a bad Kansas City team coming. But then I also said, man, the Bengals are a shock too. To be the number 1 seed after 7 weeks in the AFC is pretty weird. And to have gone into Pittsburgh and Baltimore, obviously, is pretty incredible. So I called my old friend, Brent Musburger, and who's now very close. He runs Vegas Sports and Information Network in Las Vegas. He lives for the Lions. And I asked him, if the Bengals and Chiefs met this week healthy on a neutral field somewhere, who would be favored? And he said, the Bengals. And so to me, that just emphasizes how weird the first 7 weeks have been. Something weird always happens, but those would be my 2 teams. But anyway, thanks for hopping on, Paul. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's we have quite a storm here going on in the Northeast. I know you're in a bit of a high rise down there near the city, so you're safe.
Yeah.
But it's true football weather here. It's dark and it's wet. Good time to talk ball with you.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about the Monday night game in a while, but in my opinion, I thought that the New Orleans Saints played a game that sometimes you have to win ugly in the NFL. You have to take all of the things that are on the plus side of your ledger, namely Alvin Kamara, and forget all the stuff on the debit side, which is you're a dome team and playing in crap weather is not really what you're used to doing. I thought it was a huge win for the New Orleans Saints, even though Seattle was diminished because of no Russell Wilson. I don't know how much of the game you saw, but what did you think?
I thought it was a real gutty character kind of win for the Saints. And I always kind of see things through the headlines of whatever is happening with the quarterbacks on a given team, whether it's that week or just kind of their theme at that position for the whole season. And when we looked at the Saints this season, Peter, I think the number one concern, going from Drew Brees into Jameis Winston was the turnovers. And everybody wanted to focus on what happened a couple of years ago in Tampa Bay when that number of his interceptions started with 3. But he has only thrown 3 total picks this year. He didn't throw one last night. Now, I know he had a lot of what people are going to say easy throws to Alvin Kamara right in front of him. I mean, that was just smart football. Great job by him and by Sean Payton for drawing that up and for staying committed to it. Because, I mean, in one way, I think teams should do it more often because that's the guy closest to you. He's not getting the best or even the second or third best corner on him. So that was, I thought, really solid game planning. But he's not turning it over. He's driving it downfield when he needs to. And they are proving they can win small ball with Jameis taking care of the football in a number of these games. So big win, but bigger picture. They're getting even a little more than what the optimistic person thought of what they could get out of Jameis at this point.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Paul, let's go to my little Musburger thought now. I would pick Cincinnati and Kansas City as my biggest upside surprise and biggest downside surprise. I'll give you 2 sentences on both. Number 1 with Cincinnati, great additions on defense. Trey Hendrickson, I think he's got 6 sacks now, has really made that not sort of a paper mache defense anymore. And then Joe Burrow. Look, I am leading the Joe Burrow parade. I said at the start of the year, I thought he was going to be the reincarnation of Dan Fouts. I just think he's been absolutely terrific. But on the Kansas City side, what really would worry me is Patrick Mahomes is trying to make too much happen. Period. That bothers me. Great quarterbacks have to know when you've got to go in the fetal position, take the sack, or when you have to just throw it into the third row of the bleachers. I just, he's such a great, even though you don't think of Patrick Mahomes as a warrior, I look at him in that way. They have to stop doing that. And the other thing is, man, that offensive line's just got to do a little bit better job in protection. I haven't even mentioned the defense, but man, until they get some of that offense right, I don't think even a top 10 defense is going to help them. But I've said too much on mine. Give me yours. You might agree that those are the two teams that have surprised you the most.
Yeah, I'd like to tag on to Kansas City there a little bit, Peter. And to me, this is, it certainly counts as a surprise on the negative side that the Chiefs are struggling this much offensively. But I think it's as big a story, however you want to label it, as we have in the NFL right now, that it's highlighted by the fact that they didn't score a touchdown this past weekend. And one of two things is going on. And I'd love to dive into it. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about it next week in detail. But one of two things has happened with that Chiefs offense. This theory that every single team in the AFC spent their offseason thinking, well, if we're going to advance, we have to find a way to beat Kansas City. They have either found a scheme that is working, a way to defend Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid that they didn't have in years past, and executing it. That's the first thing that might be going on. The second is, and this is the harder conclusion to come to, and I think people are kind of afraid to say it because he's been so good and he's still so talented. Maybe Patrick Mahomes has really regressed that much. Maybe the offensive line struggling at the end of last year created some bad habits, not just with running out of the pocket when he shouldn't, but with how he's seeing it.
Yes.
Is he seeing it when he needs to see it? Because last year there were a lot of other things on his mind. But clearly, one of those two things is front and center in Kansas City with that offense right now. I think it's as big a story as there is in the NFL.
The one thing you just said is I really think that this has to do with what he's seeing and the fact that, when you talk to, and I've read this, I've not talked to a defensive coordinator about what's wrong with the Chiefs, but I've read a couple of things from players about when you take away the two deep halves of the field and make sure that Tyreek Hill becomes an intermediate weapon and not a deep weapon. It's what the 49ers failed to do in the Super Bowl, which is, to protect the deep part of the field, against Tyreek Hill. And that's what led to that, I think it was the 42-yard completion when the Chiefs were down 10 with 8 minutes to go that led to their comeback in that Super Bowl. But right now, they are not getting anything really deep to Tyreek Hill. And I think that hurts the Chiefs for this reason. It makes everything in the middle of the field. Normally, you'd have some good middle of the field routes for Kelsey to take advantage of and, to swing a back out of the backfield on a wheel route. And it's just so crowded there now. So to me, I look at what defenses are doing as being particularly frustrating. And look, I never thought I would say this about Kansas City, but all the guys who they have just sort of let go. And look, I have been critical a little bit over the years of Sammy Watkins, but Sammy Watkins would be an absolute boon to this team right now because it would give the other side of the field. You'd have to have respect for the speed on that side, on the other side of the field, opposite Tyreek Hill. And right now, teams just don't have to do that.
Yeah, I think that no matter which side you come down on the biggest reason for Kansas City's offense taking a pretty big step back, I think you'd have to agree that defenses have evolved against the Chiefs. And one thing we've always done with Andy Reid, all the way back to his time in Philadelphia, is he's earned the benefit of the doubt. And so let's give him a chance for the next few weeks to see if his offense can evolve to change with how the defenses have changed playing them. And, that would assume that Patrick Mahomes is there ready to be the Mahomes we've seen. But it certainly bears watching.
Isn't it incredible when you think about it, Paul, that, a month ago, you would have absolutely written in pen, you would have written it in Sharpie, Giants at Kansas City, Monday night, week 8. that is, you do not have to watch that game. That one's going to be 38-13.
Yeah.
And now that game is a little bit of a mystery. I will say this. It's a good get-well foe for Kansas City. But as New York has shown, especially if they get one of their receivers back, and I think they might get Kadarius Toney back, if they get at least one of their receivers back, look, Kansas City has not shown that it can stop anybody, even a poor offense like the Giants. So all of a sudden, that to me looks like a competitive game. So we'll see.
I think Kansas City is a great pick in a disappointing way, in a negative way, to be the most disappointing team. I go to Miami for the one right after it,
Great
Peter.
one.
And hey, Tua's progressing. He's been fine. He's had some really bad moments these last couple of weeks, but I think there's been more good than bad. And he's not the main problem. It's that defense that was really the calling card. It was the reason they were 10-6 last year, is the reason everybody felt good about them taking a step this year. The defense, I think, Peter, I think they've given up more yards than any team in the NFL. I think they've given up more points than any team in the AFC. And this team that had 6 losses all of last year, they already have 6 losses this year. And I think right after Kansas City, because of the hope and the energy created at the end of last year by that defense, I think they are the 1A to the next most disappointing team after the Chiefs.
It's a great, great point. And, I got a lot of criticism on Twitter on Monday of this week. A lot, well, whatever. And I got 4 or 5 emails. How can you say that Tua Tagovailoa was just mediocre, or whatever it is I said about Tua in that game against Atlanta? He threw for 4 touchdowns. He did this, he did that, brought him back from 27-14. And my response to that would be, it was Tua's incredibly terrible interception as Miami was driving down 20-14. And he threw it right into the arms of an Atlanta linebacker. Ball got returned to the 10, easy touchdown drive for Matt Ryan. And so all of a sudden it's 27-14. Okay, he made a great comeback, 2 touchdowns in the last 12 minutes or whatever. He is the reason why they had to make the comeback. You can't tell me that was a great game for the quarterback when the quarterback turned the ball over on 2 interceptions that led to 10 points. And 7 of the 10 were simple points. So to me, and look, Paul, I don't know how you look at it, but I think 13 games or whatever it is for Tua, 16 games, is just way, way too little and too sparse a resume to throw Tua out. I just don't see it. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. But you also have to ask this question. And again, I do not support trading for Deshaun Watson. I think if somebody is going to trade for Deshaun Watson, let them do it. I just think it's too dangerous, too problematic right now. It strikes me as too much of a panic move. However, if you're Miami and you feel like after a year and a half being around Tua, you have real questions, real significant questions about whether he's going to be a good, a playoff long-term quarterback, then you understand why that a team like Miami might be considering this. I don't know how you view it, but man, we have instantaneous, times when we have to look at quarterbacks and make judgments. I was telling somebody this the other day. I said, in the early 80s, I will guarantee you, if this was today's football, Phil Simms never would have led the Giants to 2 Super Bowls, and he was leading them to the second one, the Buffalo one, before he broke his foot against Buffalo on a Saturday afternoon in December. But the point remains that Phil Simms was injured 4 of his first 5 years as a quarterback with the Giants, and he didn't play well when he played. So there's no question that he would have, in today's football, Phil Simms would have been jettisoned and they would have been on to the next guy. And I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but I sincerely question whether the Giants would have got to either one of those Super Bowls without Phil Simms. So that's the danger of making these decisions on quarterbacks so early.
Great context there with the whole Phil Simms comparison there back in the mid to late 80s and early 90s. Here's my feeling on Tua and the whole Dolphins thing, Peter. And I join you in receiving all kinds of criticism about what we said last week about Tua. I think he is a nice quarterback who's made good strides this year. Let's back up to what you said last week about your top 12 quarterbacks. And I think at that point, Joe Burrow was just toward the bottom as your top 12. Is
Right.
Tua anywhere near cracking that list? And the answer is no. You can think he is moving in the right direction, and maybe he's got a future there as a playoff quarterback. And you're right. They picked him there a year ago. They ought to stay with him and see if it works out. But right now, he's not in that space, even though he's getting better. And we remember most what we saw last. And this is a harsh way of looking at it for Dolphins fans. But think about what Tua did over the weekend and the plays that you mentioned, the negative ones. And last night, Jameis Winston doing a really nice job in tough conditions. Who's the better quarterback right now? Who would you rather have for the next 2 years? It's Jameis Winston. And he's not anywhere near that top 12 list either. And that's, to me, that's the point. This is a guy getting better. But is he a top 12? Is he a top 20 quarterback right now? No, he's not. And there are other quarterbacks that you would rather have in that spot while you try and wait and figure out if he is indeed going to get there.
Give me your team then on the plus side if Miami's your disappointing team.
On the positive side, it's Arizona. I know we're going to talk Arizona with their game this week coming up. So I went to the one right below them. To me, it's the Dallas Cowboys. And I don't know if you can find a team outside of the Cardinals that has exceeded even the most realistic of expectations, that we're leaning on the positive side, who has exceeded them more than the Cowboys. I mean, if you wanted the Cowboys to be good this year, you thought, well, maybe Dan Quinn could get that defense to be a little better. I think they're quite a bit better. You know, maybe Dak can come back and be close to what he was before. This is the best version we've ever seen of Dak, including that rookie season when he was super productive. And who thought that Zeke was going to be averaging 20 touches and 100 yards per game? So pick a category where you evaluated the Cowboys in August. They're significantly better in all those major categories. So I'll take that team as the most positive, most surprising.
I don't think anybody would be surprised that right now in the pecking order of each conference, Houston is number 16. And I'm talking about in as the NFL does week by week playoff seedings. Houston is number 16 in the AFC, and Detroit is number 16 in the NFC. So nobody would be surprised at that. But I'll tell you, anybody who before the start of the season had the top seeds after week 7 being Cincinnati and Arizona, I want to go into business with you because you're pretty good at projecting things. Paul, let's move on to a few quick hit topics now. I want to know what you would do right now if you're Kyle Shanahan. In my opinion, you know, we could have easily picked San Francisco, either of us, as one of the most disappointing teams or the most. At 2-4 with an absolute mess at the quarterback position, when before the year, you would have thought, hey, embarrassment of riches to have Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. And now Lance is still trying to come back from an injury. Garoppolo looks lousy. They have what I think is a really must game this week at Chicago. Give me your view of what you do if you're Kyle Shanahan right now.
Yeah, disappointing certainly counts. They were a strong candidate there to fall into that conversation. I would stay with Jimmy Garoppolo, Peter, and I don't even think it's a tough call right now. And here's my read on that one. Kyle's had a number of chances to go with Trey Lance instead of Jimmy Garoppolo. If it was close in training camp, I think he would have gone with this rookie who adds the running. If it was close early in the season, when is San Francisco going to be good, or are they going to take a step back? He would have gone with him then. He is, even though Garoppolo has struggled recently and he had some really bad moments over the weekend, Kyle has seen Jimmy Garoppolo execute this offense, this passing offense, more times than not in the last few years when he's healthy. He's seen him do it pretty well. And then I think you also have to take a step back and look at the NFC. There are only 6 teams with winning records right now. 7 are going to make the playoffs. So you start running down the list of the teams chasing that final wild card right now. And even though it's early to think that way, you can do the math. The teams at 500 or with losing records, San Francisco's got as much going for it, if Garoppolo plays pretty well, as any of those teams to claim that last spot. So he's seen him do it before, and he knows one of these teams that's struggling right now is going to be playing in January. And I think Garoppolo gives him that best chance, because what we've seen of Lance, he's just not there as a passer right now. And I think Kyle knows that better than everybody.
The thing that would worry me about really worry me about this team, and look, it's a worry, is that so many of their high draft choices just really are not panning out like their top 3 round draft picks. And I give you as Exhibit A, Brandon Ayuk, who really, when he was drafted with a first round pick last year, I think the perception was he and Deebo Samuel were going to be one of the great 1-2 combinations in football. And when I heard on the Sunday night game, Al Michaels say words to this effect that, we talked to Kyle Shanahan, he just said, hey, he's a great player. He just got to grind more, or whatever Al said. Man, that set off alarm bells. It really did. Because the one thing you should do when you're a rookie and you're a second-year guy is you should be working your rear end off to be great in the NFL. That told me that either there's a sense of entitlement or the work ethic is not good. But more than that, Paul, it told me that the work that should have been done on Brandon Ayuk at Arizona State by the 49ers, maybe they can look back at their process and say, we knew everything about him, he's just changed. I don't know. But that would worry me, to spend a first-round pick who then, when he gets to your place, you have to worry about either his work ethic, his character, something like that. That would really bother me. So, and look, you've been around, that the effort that players give and the work that players do off the field, it's exemplified by Tom Brady. How did he get to the point in life where the 199th pick in the draft becomes the conqueror of Mount Bledsoe and then the greatest quarterback ever, perhaps? He got that way because he never stopped working. And I think that's a great example for players. And I don't know how you see it, but the Ayuk thing really bothers me.
If that's true about how the first part of his career has not been productive, we've all seen that based off of how he's worked or not worked, then shame on him. But we have seen this before, guys at this point of their career who can excel, and this can be any professional league. They can come into the league and excel in college, and they get there and figure out, oh my gosh, the grind level, the compete level is off the charts, and it's brand new to me. I didn't have to do this before. And guys either figure it out in years 2 or 3, or they don't. So if he hasn't figured it out yet, this back half of the season, where the Niners are sprinting to be that last team or one of the last teams to make the playoffs, they're going to need him in that passing game. So he has a chance here, an excellent chance to figure it out and be a part of what could be a big comeback here for the Niners.
Paul, 2 other topics that I wanted to hit. I want to know, in your mind, what team out there, maybe it's Miami, maybe it's Carolina, maybe it's Philadelphia. I think it was very fortuitous for Houston general manager Nick Caserio to look at the NFL and the landscape in the NFL and to see Tua throwing a couple of bad interceptions on Sunday, to see Sam Darnold get yanked by Carolina in yet another loss for the Panthers, and to see the Eagles play so poorly on offense, and figure that Howie Roseman, the general manager, Jeff Lurie, the owner, think almost certainly that they're going to be in the market for a quarterback sooner or later. And by later, I mean in the 2022 offseason. Do you think that one of those teams should trade for Deshaun Watson? If so, which one?
I first want to ask a question and get clarification in your understanding here, Peter. Are they still wanting 3 firsts over the next 2 or 3 years to pull off this deal? Is that what's out there?
Nick Caserio is keeping it extremely close to the vest. Okay. I don't think anybody knows for sure what they want, but I doubt you will see them trade Deshaun Watson without at least 2 solid number ones and then a conditional number one, with the conditions being, look, if he's not on the field in the next 2 years or the next year and a half, then, you won't get that third one. But look, I don't know that, but someone in the NFL theorized that to me over the weekend, that maybe if you both figure that Deshaun Watson is going to play and probably play well at some point before the end of the 22 season, why don't you just make the third first-round pick contingent on something very simple, that he plays 40% of the snaps by the end of 2022. So, but yes, I do think in a practically speaking, that it will take 3 ones to get him.
This is such an unprecedented situation, Peter, with the unknowns that are out there with such a young, talented quarterback. The unknowns with what the legal system is going to do, the unknowns with how the NFL will respond to that, and the unknowns with how your fan base will respond to you bringing in the face of the franchise with this kind of the last 12 to 24 months of his resume off the field. So because of that, I would have to take the conditional picks to a brand new level of something we haven't seen before. I think number one, I think your first round pick at 22, great, straight up, you can have it. I need the rest of those picks, whether it's a couple of ones, a 1 and a couple of 2s. I need the rest of them to be as conditional as any draft picks that have ever had in the history of the NFL because of the severity of those unknowns. So for 1 first and some really liberal conditional high picks coming up, I would consider it. But if I had to guarantee I'm giving up more than just 1, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Paul, we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's rare, and I can't think of the last time that the best game in the NFL on a given week was on Thursday night. Mm-hmm. And that is the case this week. Green Bay, whoever's going to wear the Green Bay uniform this weekend or this week, they've got to find enough players to suit up and go to Arizona. But one of them is going to be Aaron Rodgers, so presumably. How do you view that game? And tell me, in your mind, how worried would you be if you're the Green Bay Packers and you go in so wounded to that game?
Yeah, and the name right there, Davante Adams, I mean, he may or may not be available with the COVID protocol. So he's as important as anybody on that team besides Aaron Rodgers. I'd be really concerned. If they had Davante Adams, I think it's, I would still think that Arizona should be the favorite. But without Davante Adams, I look at Arizona as double digits better than the Green Bay Packers. If they do have him out there, it's still Arizona that's stronger really everywhere. You could say it's a tie at quarterback right now with the 2 leading MVP candidates in the NFC, but there's much more margin for error for Arizona. They can play pretty well and win. Green Bay would have to play its very best game, I think, even with Davante Adams, to win that one.
I think it's a good point. I sort of look at this game, and, the other day watching a lot of the Packers game, first of all, I was just transfixed, kind of staring at the screen, looking at their uniforms. I love their uniforms.
So
those alternate, the beautiful forest green with bright yellow. I thought that was perfect. But watching that game, I said to myself, I think that anytime normally you lose great players like Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith and Jair Alexander. That is hugely dangerous for your defense. But their defense is really playing well. And I look at a young guy like Rashawn Gary, and I basically say that when you pick a guy and he needs to take time to get good, I hate to say to get good at pro football, but that really strikes me as, as to what happened with them. And to me, I kind of look at their team right now, and they got a bunch of Rashawn Garys on defense. That, to me, in that game against Washington, there was a marauding band of guys who you really don't know. And it was kind of led by Gary. He had 2 sacks, hit or pressured Taylor Heineke 4 more times. He forced a fumble. He was all over the field. And I said, look, as much as you want to criticize everything about the Green Bay franchise, because of the Aaron Rodgers problems, I'll say this. They've drafted pretty well in recent years. And this, to me, is just another example. It's a former first-round pick you haven't heard a lot of. But to me, I think that was a really fortuitous pick who came through at the right time for them. And he'll definitely need to do that against Kyler Murray on Thursday night.
Yeah, because, really, it's a simple way of looking at it, Peter. But one way you can look at this game a couple of days out is which defense has the better chance of giving a quarterback a bad game. And Aaron Rodgers struggled in the first game, but every game since, you add up losses and interceptions for Aaron Rodgers, that number is 1. He's thrown 1 pick and they haven't lost. Kyler Murray's worst game, he played pretty well against San Francisco. It was pedestrian by his standards, but he hasn't had a bad game yet. And Aaron hasn't had a bad game since game 1. So can Rashawn Gary be part of giving Kyler his first bad game? We shall see. And as for the uniforms, Peter, my high school, Iowa City West High School, opened in 1969. And they're green and gold, and they designed their uniforms off of the Vince Lombardi Packers that had done so well in the 60s. So I tweeted at them yesterday that they ought to base them off of the uniforms in the 50s, because those uniforms were even better. Some of these throwback uniforms you just kind of laugh at, but those are at the top of the list. And
some of Paul, listen, some of those uniforms you don't laugh at, you throw up at.
There you go.
Like, the Steelers convict uniforms and the Packers
gosh,
bizarre blue uniforms.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, some of these things scream either A, Halloween costume, or B, merchandise throwing of darts. I don't know. But anyway, it's kind of crazy. Hey, well, listen, thanks so much, Paul, for breaking down the league with me after another very, very weird week. I appreciate it. We will get together again next week to talk about further weirdness in the National Football League.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.